Hello, everybody.
Hello. This should be a fun episode of our new series. We're going to be talking about Jewish Midrash. Maybe we should explain a little bit about what that is, since it's our first episode. Do you want me to explain it, or do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, so Midrash, we did explain it in our first series when we talked about the rabbinical origins of Islam. So just a quick recap is to remind us that Midrash refers to what Jewish rabbis, how they kind of an approach to how they interpret the biblical text. And interpret is kind of, from our perspective, used pretty loosely here because when we're talking about Midrash, and we're just going to, for simplicity's sake, we're just going to say Midrash, but technically it is a certain genre of Midrash called Midrash Haggadah that we're going to be talking about in this series. And the other form of Midrash is Halakha, which is about laws or rules. And that's normally what people think of when they think of rabbinical Judaism, is the extra rules that they add on. But we're going to be talking about the stories. So Midrash Haggadah is about stories that are told by the rabbis and that have been developed over many centuries, originally in oral form and then written in different texts, lots of different texts, over many centuries, going back as far as we can trace it back is the intertestamental period, and all the way from that point until, I suppose, until today.
Yeah.
Where rabbinical Jews would basically craft narratives or create narratives that often fill in the gaps in the biblical stories, the biblical narrative, or they'll take a little detail or term often, and they'll kind of expand on. They'll expand on it often to an extreme extent by basically fabricating or creating a whole new fictional story. Now, although they don't treat it all as fictional, rabbinical Jews, to one degree or another, believe at least certain of the Midrashim, which is the plural form of Midrash, these stories. Some of them are not accepted as reliable history, but some are, and are just taken for granted. And so what we've discovered is that in our study of the Qur'an, as anybody who's done any study of the Qur'an, really, from a critical perspective, has discovered and heard about some legendary materials, which is essentially, this is what it is. Midrash is the legends of the Jews, or the rabbis in particular. And we see a number of those strewn throughout interspersed in the accounts of biblical people in the Quran. So there are very common ones, or known, like well-known ones, but we've discovered a lot that either haven't been recognized or just are not well known by people who are discussing the Quran, especially as Christians, or sometimes even in the case of critical scholars who are not necessarily Christian. So discovering that, it's kind of pretty revealing, because what it adds it onto it is it shows us that really there is a strong rabbinical connection for the origins of Islam. And it's kind of strange if somebody was to think that the Quran came from primarily a Christian origin when it's filled with rabbinical legends. So, you might imagine some popular Christian legends making it in because it's known in the environment. But why would all these Jewish legends be in there unless it's primarily coming from them? So we're going to use a bunch of them, a bunch of examples, and today we're going to do a focus on elements of Midrash in the Joseph narrative. And God willing, we'll have other episodes on basically all of the other prophets and patriarchs in the biblical narrative that are in the Quran as well. So we'll try to do at least an episode for each. And there's a lot in Joseph. So anything you wanna lead us in with those Quranic verses to introduce it?
Okay, so where did Muhammad get his knowledge from? And as you mentioned, they're coming from the Jewish rabbis who developed Midrash or who believed in Midrash, let's say, right? And they are primary sources from the Quran. There are a few places we can refer to. Surah 26, Ayah 192 and 96 said, "This Quran is certainly a revelation from the Lord of all words, and indeed it is mentioned in the scriptures of former people." Former peoples meaning primarily the Jews and also Christians as well. But then Surah 25, 4 and 5 says, the disbelievers say this Quran is nothing but a fabrication which he made up with the help of others. The claim is totally unjustified and untrue. And they say, legends of the former peoples, which he has written down, and they are dictated to him morning and afternoon. So as you see, we have again the words former peoples, meaning the Jews. So the non-believing Arabs from Quraysh, they said that Muhammad get his Quran basically through the Jews and from the legends of these Jews. It's interestingly why they didn't say that the Quran came from scripture of former people, Al-Kitab.
Right.
That we're gonna expect that to be like a what called a claim, not a claim as what the.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize that what you notice here is that it's scriptures of the former peoples versus legends of the former peoples.
Yeah.
And that I remember when you showed me that, I was like, oh, actually, that's a really good point. They're not accusing the Quran of just actually. What do Christians always say? That the Quran is plagiarized from the Bible.
From the Bible, from the Bible. They said.
Actually, we're at our recent dialogue that we had at the masjid. Remember when I used the example from Noah?
Yeah.
I did a statistical analysis and came to, I think it was 72% of the verses in the Quran, in the Noah narrative, have no equivalent in Genesis, which doesn't mean it's like about completely different, unrelated things. It's supposed to fit in the story, but it has no equivalent in the story. So it's just additional material. We always hear that the Muslims say the Quran is so amazing because it just selects the most important things. But what we found is actually it is kind of abbreviated in some places, but in many places it adds tons of material that has no basis in the Torah. And what we discovered is a lot of that is rooted in Jewish Midrash.
Yeah.
So no wonder the people in the time the disbelievers who didn't accept the Quran, saw it for what it was and what it is. It's not confirming the scriptures. Yeah. It's confirming the legends. But actually, even that is not. It's not, confirmation isn't necessarily the best word.
Yeah, that's the best word.
Because it messes them up too.
Oh yeah, we're gonna find out about that soon. All right.
So take it away to the first one. This part. Oh yeah. Why don't you explain these 2 points?
I can
introduce it. Yeah.
I could say definitely Midrash was invented much later, like hundreds and hundreds of years later after the Torah was given. Mm-hmm. So that's why we know. Problem is the Jewish people today, the rabbinical Judaism, Pharisaical rabbinical Judaism, based on a lot of their doctrines on the Midrash. And they claim that, as you said, the Midrash is basically it's equal to the written Torah. So the oral Midrash is basically part of oral Torah, and it's kind of equal with the written Torah. And some of the rabbis said the Midrash is like a key to unlock the hidden meaning and the true meaning of the written Torah. So they claim if people like us, non-Jews, who will have access to the Torah, read it, that we will not understand the true meaning of it because we lack of information of Midrash. But guess what? Since it was given, they claim it was given orally, which I believe it's never been given orally at all. It's been developed as a writing from the get-go. But that's what they say. So it was kind of, given orally transmitted for hundreds and hundreds of years. Everything, the massive volume of information. Eventually, they went into the place when the Romans came into the power, and in spite of being oppressed before by different nations, suddenly the Romans influence on the Jews bad ways, so they start losing concentration. In meaning, they start losing the memory, and they said, "Oh, we have to write it down," and before we lost it. So that's kind of lame excuse to show, and they claim it was another almost 900 years efforts to write it down. So which is bizarre because if the rabbi or the Moses, for example, he get entire midrash in his memory, and then he pass on to Joshua, and then Joshua pass on to somebody else. So it means all you need maybe a few years of, retelling the story from your mind for other guys to somehow remember it. I'm not even going there to try to explain why it's impossible to retain everything in a memory. But nevertheless, so it will take maybe, let's see, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years. How come then you need 900 years to collect all of this? I would say it's been development for 900 years. They will keep writing it down for 900 years. Yes, so that makes sense. Sure. Everything else doesn't.
Well, you can expand on it orally. You can develop it orally and written, and it goes to different. It'll go to different places, so it's going to have different. And we see that evidence is there's different forms of many of the stories and different times and places.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets kind of complicated.
and also, okay, we don't even need to debate that part. All we need to read it through the Midrash and find out that actually it was written and developed way later than Torah, which is that
definitely it's way later than Torah.
Way later than Torah, not during the time of Moses.
And should be said, maybe relating it to the Qur'an too, that a lot of them we can trace to be prior to the time of Muhammad.
Oh, for sure.
But some, a lot of it also you find it in collections
after
written down later.
Yep.
But that just because those may be the earliest collections we have doesn't mean they weren't written long before. We just don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And so yeah. Anyway, we got to keep that in mind, and maybe we'll discuss more of dating and things like that as we go.
Yeah. We have to keep in mind that some Muslims try to tell me or us that Midrash was based on the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
Not really, because when I ask Muslims who thought who tried to argue with us or debate with us about Midrash, did you read the Midrash? No. Okay. You read Midrash and then you're not going to make such a claim, because you could see right away from the very beginning that Midrash is nothing but a Jewish fairy tale based on the Jewish Torah.
Well, it's kind of like they don't read the Bible either, so
yeah,
they don't read either one.
They
make judgments without knowledge.
It's based on the Bible, because, for example, my favorite passage is Genesis, Genesis chapter 38. It's extensively talk about Midrash. It's a very interesting passage, but the Quran is completely absent. In the Quran, there is nothing about Genesis 38 story.
Right, about Judah and Tamar.
Yeah. Judah and Tamar, but Midrash is full of it. That's a very thorough story.
Yeah, so, maybe just before we get into all the specifics, it's good to kind of give some general principles or things to keep in mind as people are introduced to specific stories. Keeping in mind that, yes, of course, Muslims have to try to claim, well, the Midrash must have come after and must have copied from the Quran. So really, you just need to keep in mind, like let's just say we can't establish, we don't have a manuscript, we can't establish it definitively before, prove that it came before, like from physical evidence or something, right? But then it's just a matter of analyzing both texts and looking at if there are internal reasons to judge, where would one come from? Would one come from the other? Are they completely independent? Are they, etc. So I think, again, as we often say, the devil's in the details. When you look at the details in the story, each account, you can tell in general that the Midrashic legends are presupposing the Genesis or biblical Torah framework of the story, and they're building and filling out that story. They're not let's say if the Torah's, or like the Torah in Genesis, is a skeleton, the Midrash is all the meat and the flesh that's built on that skeleton, but it's not built on the Quran as the skeleton.
Yeah, exactly.
The Quranic story actually, it doesn't fit with it well. At the same time, what we see is that, in a way, the Midrash is the skeleton for the Quran, right? So the Quran is built on Midrashic ideas, but often even that is
inaccurate,
mixed up, and not quite right.
Yeah.
Just as we see when it's parallel with biblical things, it isn't quite right about a lot of things.
Oh,
yeah. So it's just a matter of keeping that in mind, what makes sense, and we will always going to have to revisit that or look at it closely to, really examine it. It's not always going to be based on, here's a definitive date for this text, and this is when it originally originated. And again, we like to say we're building a cumulative case. It's not just built on like one point.
Exactly.
Okay, take it over.
Yeah, so let's have a few examples because Midrash was invented much later than the Torah. Mm-hmm. For example, at the same time, Noah conveyed by his words that the Shekinah would dwell only in the first temple, erected by Solomon, the son of Shem, and not in the second temple, the builder of which could be Cyrus, the descendants of Japhet. Now we're talking about from Legends of the Jews.
What's the Shekinah, so people know if they don't know?
Yeah, Shekinah is the glory of God, right? So like a visible presence.
Like the presence of God in a specific place, yeah.
So how Noah, if you read the story of Noah, nowhere anywhere in the Torah you can find a reference to the first temple, second temple. Well, definitely people who wrote this stuff and added this verse into the Noah story, they already knew it was at least two temples erected, and for sure it was already first and second have been destroyed. So we know the time frame is after Jesus Christ. That's it for sure. So they develop it, but they somehow put these words into the story of as if Noah was aware of the both temples, and by people who will build in Cyrus. Like, did he know the Cyrus? The Jews said, "Oh yeah, because Hashem, God, gave him knowledge to him, right? Which we can find it in the Torah." Then another one. Then Isaac reached the age of 123, and he was thus approached the years attained by his mother. He began to meditate upon his end. He summoned Esau, and he said, "My son." And Esau replied, "Here I am." But the Holy Spirit interposed. Thought he discusses his voice and makes it sound sweet, put no confidence in him. There are 7 abominations in his heart. He will destroy 7 holy places: Tabernacle, the sanctuaries of Gilgal, Shiloh, Nob, and Gibeon, and the first and second temple. Now, can you imagine again the same thing, mentioning of first and second temple? It's attributed to the knowledge of Isaac, like Isaac heard about it, right?
It's so exhaustive too. I wouldn't have ever thought of Gilgal and Gibeon.
Oh yeah.
If I was trying to list them all.
And it's funny because now he said like Esau was the father of people who destroyed the first temple, which is Assyrians, and the father of Romans as well, who destroyed the second temple. So that's
Oh,
kind
you know what's interesting? It doesn't mention the Kaaba.
no, there's no Kaaba for sure.
Yeah, so Midrash doesn't know about the Kaaba.
Oh yeah, because
It's
sanctuary.
obviously not based on the Quran.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, it will be.
It should add that as another house of God.
That's right. Then the major things for why the Jews developed Midrash and created Midrash, because they want to whitewash the sins of prophets and patriarchs in the Torah. That's so obvious, and let us look at a few examples. On his journey from Canaan to Egypt, Abraham first observed the beauty of Sarah. Now, we're talking about like how old he was when he was traveling from Canaan to Egypt? 80s, something?
Canaan to Egypt. Wow, that's yeah.
Yeah, so 80 plus.
They were already married in Ur of the Chaldeans.
Yeah, like 60 years.
Migrated to Haran.
Yeah.
Lived there for years.
Okay.
Until Terah died before they went to Canaan. Then now we're talking about from Canaan to Egypt.
Yeah, so we're talking about like 50 years of marriage, let's say.
It's crazy.
And then it said, chaste as he was, he had never before looked at her. Well, because it's sin, right? Look at her, your wife. Well, somehow they had sex and they tried to have a kids and it never happened. So that's okay, but don't look at her, right? Because you can have developed the lust of what to your wife. It's kind of funny. But now when they were wading through the stream, he saw the reflection of her beauty in the water like a brilliance of the sun. Oh, that was an accident. So no, like he didn't sin, but looking at his wife's face. That's another one, which is my favorite by far. Judah passed Tamar by without paying any attention to her, and she raised her eyes heavenward and said, O Lord of the world, shall I go forth empty from the house of despised men? Then God sent an angel that is appointed over the passion of love, and he compelled Judah to turn back. So now the Jews basically saying, you know what, Judah could say, I didn't do it, God made me do it, right? So don't blame me for me sleeping with Tamar. Oh, no. It was actually God who sent angel of love and passion and lust, probably lust, yeah, why not? And compelling to do the fornication. I mean, you see what happened is, I think it's God behind everything, right? Every feeling. So it has angels appointed on different feelings. And as angel approach you, you look at the woman with lust because the angel did it. It's not you, of course not.
I mean, even all of this is so legendary. The Bible doesn't talk about angels of feelings.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, but when you look at it, it's like if you read Genesis 38, you could clearly see that both of them made their own decision to actually do something wrong. But the Jews think, what should we say? It's our patriarchs. So are they sinners? Oh, not really. And they developed story of it was actually God who prompted them to do that. So that's clear whitewashing. And now we can go for about 10.
Can I just mention one other example? I just wanted to, because it's so ridiculous. So it's not in our notes, but I'm looking on, or if you want to pull it up in Ginsburg.
Okay.
It is volume 3 or volume 4. Sorry. Under, maybe share the screen so I can guide you.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me try to find it.
If you enter the PDF page, it's 1,391. So if we read this very last sentence that starts at the end of the page, and we're going to go on to the next page, talking about Saul.
Okay.
You want to read it?
His chief virtue, however, was his innocence.
Next sentence.
Wow, he was as free from sin as a 1-year-old child. Yeah, right.
Okay, Okay, go.
Ouch.
Wait. Go to page 68. You're on 66. Go to page 68. The first couple sentences or so.
Compared with David's sins, Saul's were not sufficiently grievous to account for the withdrawal of the royal dignity from him and his family.
Next sentence.
The real reason was Saul's too great mildness and drawback in a ruler.
Right? So it's just crazy.
Yeah, nothing much, right?
So the like the first wicked king is better than David.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, no wonder these rabbis influenced Muhammad in a way that even today Muslims saying, "Oh, your Torah, your Bible is full of bad people." You made not you, but the Jews before, they made all these prophets look so bad, right?
Mhm.
So it's like, but originally prophets were good. Well, yes, where did you get information from? The Jews, from Yahud.
Mhm.
So, and they have a Torah on the Tanakh, and they don't change that. None of the,
Yeah.
no Torah or Tanakh was ever changed in the story of, let's say, Saul and David are from a Tanakh, not from a Torah. And yet, even these stories were not changed.
Yeah.
So they created the Midrash, another book, to whitewash the sins.
Yeah, and they pretend like the Midrash is compatible with the Tanakh. It's like insane. But it's like what you see here is they're like flipping it around his character, and they invent these fanciful stories to justify the behavior or give him an excuse. And I think for Saul, the reason they did it is because there's a line, and I showed you the other day, and I think it's in First Samuel 10, when he's being picked, and then he walks by these other prophets who are prophesying, and then the Spirit of God comes upon him, he starts prophesying, and then the question's asked, is Saul also among the prophets?
Prophets, yeah.
Right? So because the rabbis, similar to what the Muslims believe about prophets, is that they are virtually sinless. So if Saul is among the prophets, then he must be sinless, in which case they got to reread everything in the text because he's constantly sinning in the text.
Yeah.
So, and that just, it exposes where the Quran really comes from, because it's
yeah.
coming from the same concept of prophethood that the rabbis have.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Okay, we got to get into Joseph.
All right, let's go to Joseph, and we'll go for the first thing, right? Doesn't matter.
How about I read it? Maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just pull that up for myself. So, yeah, in the Quran, from Surah Yusuf, because we're going to basically be doing Surah Yusuf for this episode on Joseph. So, verse 5 says, He, Jacob, replied to Joseph, "O my dear son, do not relate your vision." He's referring to his dream. Don't relate your vision to your brothers, or they will devise a plot against you. Surely Satan is a sworn enemy to humankind. Well, what do we see told by Ginsburg in Legends of the Jews? Jacob may be excused. He had spoken in this way only in order to avert the envy and hate of his brethren from Joseph. But they envied and hated him because they knew that the interpretation put upon the dream by Jacob would be realized.
Yeah, I want to show you something. As we see, Midrash is not derived from the Quran, because in the Quran, Father was very happy. But when we read, Jacob might be excused. He has spoken in what way?
Excuse for what? Yeah.
You have to go to the Torah, then you can find out what's happening.
Right. So it says, but when Joseph told it to his father, the dream to his father, and to his brothers, his father rebuked him, there it is, and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" So Jacob wasn't happy, and he rebuked him, which is harsh correction. And this is like for normal readers of the Bible who don't subscribe to these nonsense legends of the rabbis. We just say like what it obviously is. He was upset. What's the big deal? Like obviously he. What's the big deal theologically? I mean, like for us, who cares? He was upset or not. Who cares if Jacob sinned even in the way that he got upset? It doesn't change anything for us because he's a normal person. But according to the rabbis, he's a prophet, and prophets, according to the rabbis, should not be sinning, and certainly not like. I mean, the dream that Joseph has is prophetic in nature.
Yeah.
So why would the prophet Jacob not grasp what's going on with the dream and be upset at a good prophetic dream? It doesn't make any sense. Well, that's because that isn't what's going on in the biblical text. He's not a prophet.
Yeah.
So, but the Muslims believe the same thing as the Midrash, which is that he's a prophet.
Yeah, exactly.
And
let's go for another example. Now, the brothers brought thought that after Joseph's death, their father will love them. That's kind of bizarre thing we'll find in the Quran, right?
Right. So the verse in the Quran, verse 9. So this is brothers saying, kill Joseph or cast him out to some distant land so that our father's attention will be only ours. Then after that you may repent and become righteous people. That's funny. They're already planning to become righteous later.
Well, yeah, basically when you repent and you sorry for your sin, but we'll be fine.
But I don't remember in Genesis where they're planning to repent.
Well, it's
and intending to become righteous.
And if we're gonna read the first part, it said, "Father loved him and his brother more than us.
Right.
So let's kill him alone."
Yeah, that's
wait a minute.
Strange.
Why don't you kill both? Like you're already killing one, so who cares? Kill another one.
Right.
Because then, if they kill one and leave another one alive, the father will love him.
And of course, you're meaning Benjamin. Yeah.
Of course, yeah, Benjamin, which is like bizarre idea anyway from the Quran. It's one of the few like really strange thing in the Quran. Doesn't make sense logically, but we can find it in the Midrash. Similar point.
Okay, so I'll read that. So this is Dan's confession. Dan is one of the sons of Jacob. So he confesses, says, the spirit of envy and boastfulness goaded me on, saying, you too are the son of Jacob. And one of the spirits of Beliar, that's basically Satan, stirred me up, saying, take this sword and slay Joseph, for once he is dead, your father will love you.
Same idea. Like nowhere find in the Torah for sure. There's no room for that stuff in the Torah.
Well, actually, so that's also interesting. It's Satan. Beliar is Satan, right?
I don't know.
So one of the spirits of Satan stirred him up, saying, take this sword and kill him. So for once he is dead, your father will love you. So it's Satan provoking him to jealousy, which is what it just said in. It says in verse 5. Jacob warned Joseph in the Quran that if you tell your brothers, Satan will basically take it as an opportunity to sow jealousy.
Yeah, Satan is your worst enemy.
So here it is. Satan tells Dan, take up the sword, and once he's dead, your father will love you.
Oh,
yeah, wow.
So the Torah said completely different story, right?
Why don't you read that one?
Yeah, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we'll say that the fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. As we notice, this is one of the major big difference between the Quranic narrative and biblical narrative. Because according to the Quran, our brothers never told their father Joseph never told his brothers about his dreams.
Yeah.
and father definitely didn't do that. And they had
Right.
no idea about the dreams Joseph had, and therefore the motive of killing, according to Quran, it's very simple, benign. It's like father loved him more, let's kill him. Okay, sure, no problem.
And
So
in the Midrash, he does tell his brothers the dreams as well, like
yeah,
the Torah.
yeah,
So the
they're
Midrash is based on
on the Torah,
the skeleton of the Torah.
exactly. But what happened in the Torah, it was two dreams, not only one.
Right.
And both of them, Joseph told his brothers, and that was the last straws for them to kill him. So they hated him before, but not enough to kill him. So they need to hear dreams about him being, he will be a ruler over them. So that's main thing. So that's why it's very clear said in the Torah. Here comes this dreamer. Let's slay him, and to see what, and we will see what will become of his dreams. That was the reason to kill him. So his dreams about ruling over them will not gonna come into fruition, right?
Doesn't the Midrash, if I remember correctly, doesn't it add even more dreams? Doesn't Joseph have more than? Could be wrong.
They have a dream. Yeah, they have more dreams in different
because
Midrash.
they just add, right? So,
they add stuff, not subtract for sure.
so the Quran subtracts; it only has the one.
I think it's not so much add, but I think instead of sheaves, they have like fruit, rotten fruit, or something.
Oh, it adds things into the dreams, like different elements into the dreams. Yeah,
it was different.
It expands the dreams. Yeah.
Expand the dream. Yeah. All right. So that's second point. We see clear.
We got 10 to go through, so I guess we got to keep going.
All right. Now the third one. Jacob was sure that Joseph was alive. This is like that strange stuff, right? So first, I want to read the Torah. Okay. And they sent a robe of many colors and brought it to the father and said, "This we have found. Now, please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." And then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. So the Torah is explicitly said that Jacob believed that the shirt, the blood on the shirt was his son's blood. And he said himself, the fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. So, and he mourned for many days. That's Torah account. When you look at the Joseph was our belongings, and the wolf devoured him. But you will not believe us, no matter how truthful we are. And they brought his shirt stained with false blood. He responded, "No, your souls must have tempted you to do something evil. So I can only endure this beautiful patience. It is Allah's help that I'll seek to bear your claims." So here it's completely different story. Quran says like he doesn't believe them. Why? Because he was a prophet. That's important. Another important difference between the Torah and the Quran. That Jacob was not a prophet according to the Torah's account. He was a patriarch, not the prophet.
This is the example we always use, right? When we're comparing the Torah and the Quran. And it's interesting because it's rooted in Midrash too, the difference.
And now let's read the Midrash and see how to support the Quranic claim. It is a law of nature that however much one might grieve over the death of the dear one, at the end of the year, consolation finds its way to the heart of mourner. But the disappearance of the living man can never be wiped out of one's memory. Therefore, the fact that he was inconsolable made Jacob suspect that Joseph was alive, and he did not give entire credence to the report of his sons. So again, the Midrash based on the Torah and follow that narration of the Torah, but it's added stuff. Then 1 year later, Jacob starts suspecting something going on wrong. Well, right, I should say, with Joseph. But in the Quran, he from the first minute he denied, and he believed that Joseph was alive for entire time.
And maybe just to make sure that people know that he did believe that. I'll just read a little later on in the narrative in the Quran, because if somebody just read verse 18, they might not be sure did Jacob think that Joseph was still alive, because all it says is that he didn't believe the report of the claims of the brothers. But no, he did, because in verse 94, later in the same surah and following, says, when the caravan departed from Egypt, their father said to those around him, you may think that I am senile, but I certainly sense the smell of Joseph. They replied, by God, you are definitely still in your old delusion. But when the bearer of the good news arrived, he cast a shirt over Jacob's face, so he regained his sight. Jacob then said to his children, did I not tell you that I truly know from God what you do not know? Okay. So the old delusion is that he kept repeating is that he believed that Joseph was still alive, and they wouldn't entertain that as being true.
Yeah.
Right. So in the Quranic narrative, he believes he's alive the whole time, and the biblical narrative believes he's dead until finally at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And where you get this idea that he thinks that he's alive is actually rooted in the Midrash. I always think it's like really funny that it says at the end of a year, consolation finds its way to the heart of the mourner. Like, oh yeah, you lost your beloved child. After a year, you'd be fine.
Yeah, you're okay after that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's go for the next one. Potiphar wanted to adopt Joseph. That's all I never heard about. If you didn't read the Quran or Midrash, you don't know that's right? Mm-hmm. So the Quran said, the man from Egypt who bought him said to his wife, take good care of him. Perhaps he might be useful to us, or we might adopt him as a son. This is how we established Joseph in the land, and so on. There's a problem with it, because if somebody knows the difference between biblical and Quranic account, Joseph in the Torah said that he was 17 years old at the time of the event.
Yeah.
Pretty
when he sold into slavery, he's 17.
Yeah. But according to what we hear from the Quran, he was probably 5 years old. Mm-hmm. But no more than 7 for sure, because he has to be taken care of by the brothers.
Right.
So therefore, the 5 years old coming as, not really as a slave, as a kid, and Potiphar decided to adopt him. Which is, 17 years old, you're not going to adopt him for sure. He'll be purchased. He was purchased as a slave, not as a child. Well, the Quran said about child, like that makes sense. Let's adopt this cute little baby. Mm-hmm. Kind of, right? So let's go to Midrash, because we know where it's coming from, the Quranic passage. Potiphar treated Joseph not as a slave, but as a member of his family. At that time, it came from Memphis, the wife of Potiphar. She cast her eyes upon Joseph, of whose comeliness of person she had heard from the eunuchs. She told her husband how to anyway, so it was like a story how to buy the Joseph, and eventually she said, at night, as she had no sons, she would pretend to desire to adopt him. Well, we can understand, like Jews understand, like 17 years old cannot be like really adopted as a kid.
Right.
Or they put in her like desire to adopt him only a reason because she tried to be close to him.
She was sexually attracted.
So, I want to adopt you, but not, of course, adoption never happened in the Midrash. But the theme is adoption of like kind of idea going around, and in the Quran is like bingo, sure, he was a kid. Well, in Midrash he was 17, as in the Torah, but in the Quran, Muhammad dropped his age by 12 years approximately. So then, you can adopt the 5 years old, sure, no problem.
And it says in the Quran, like, he reaches maturity, and then she's trying to seduce him, right? So it's kind of like she waits. It's not that she's attracted to.
No, she has to wait for about 12 years or so before she does. Right. Which actually, Let's do it again. So, we'll see. Wow.
Is that your phone?
Yeah, the tablet. I was like loading up stuff. Okay. Shoot.
So we're just talking about she would have been attracted to him as a child.
Should have been attacked as a child.
Yeah.
And also, what I want to say in a. Shoot. Distraction. Oh, yeah. And also, it's very interesting if you read the Quran passages. It means that Joseph was raised in Egypt as an Egyptian, so he has very little exposure to his father at 5 years old when he was taken to Egypt, and also it adds another 12 years approximately to the time of his dwelling without father. So he dwelt, like I remember when I listened to one of the Muslim imam who's talking about the story of Joseph in the Quran, and he mentioned 30 plus years the father didn't see Joseph, and I was wondering why it's 30 plus, and then I realized, of course, in the Bible, in the Torah, we have 23 years they've been separated. But since he was 5 years old, so he needs another 12 years to grow up in Egypt. So it would be 35 years, which I doubt that father will recognize his son and son will ever recognize his father. Being 5 years old, the last time you see the father, it's kind of difficult, like 35 years later, to recognize him. Maybe it's not impossible, but nevertheless. But definitely, father will never recognize Joseph. Well, we're talking about 17 years old and 40 years old. Is big difference, but not as big as for 5 to 40, which is that for sure unrecognizable. So there's another big major difference in the Quran. The time when Joseph was apart from his family were bigger than in the Bible by 12 years.
Yeah, and it throws off the whole timeline for everything else in the story.
Exactly. So it's everything goes into the wrong spin, right? Next. The wife of Aziz or Potiphar tore the Joseph cloth. So in the Quran, it said they raced for the door and she tore his shirt from the back. Only to find her husband at the door, she cried, "What's the penalty for someone who tried to violate your wife except imprisonment or painful punishment?" Well,
yeah, so for the Christians, this is very surprising if they don't know the narrative. Because it's saying, so Potiphar, so in Genesis, the man is the master is named Potiphar, right?
yeah.
And he doesn't have that name in the Quran. He's called the Aziz, which sometimes is translated as the chief minister. It's more of a title than a name. So Aziz or Potiphar. So his wife, who is unnamed in both accounts, but in Jewish and Islamic tradition, she's called Zuleika.
Yeah.
Not in the Quran, but in tradition. So Zuleika and Joseph race for the door together. And we'll talk about the tearing of the shirt, but I just wanted to point out the very startling thing is that they only to find her husband at the door. So Joseph doesn't even get out of the room when it comes to the Quranic account, because the door, actually she locks the door, which is said in a couple verses before, I think. And so he doesn't get out of the room, and Potiphar Aziz is on the other side of the door. Just totally different than the biblical story.
Yeah, it's quite also interesting because she should be say thank you for Joseph for running away, because if the Joseph will actually respond to her call within a minute, the husband will
she would have been caught,
and that will be the end of it. So this was like, whew, last moment missing. Like, but of course, in the Midrash and in the Torah, she's supposed to wait. She will wait. She would have waited until he comes home, right? And
right, because he actually leaves in both accounts.
Yeah, because he was not there at the door waiting for them to run them.
Yeah. So the Midrash again is built on the biblical account.
Yeah.
But
She
yeah,
laid
the tearing of the shirt is
Mhm.
significant. You want to talk about that?
Yep. She laid aside her rich robes of state, put on her ordinary clothes, and took to her sickbed, in which she had been uh, lying when the people left to go to the festival. Also, she took Joseph's torn garment and laid out next to her. We never find this torn garment in the Torah, which said, she caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me, but he left his garment in her hands and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. So there is, and of course, when master came home, she just told him the false accusation, showed the garment of Joseph as a proof. He tried to rape her, and eventually he went to the prison because of that. I mean, Joseph. But in Midrash, the Torah on the garment was significant. It's important because it's actually proof that Joseph was not guilty at the end of the day. And Potiphar recognized that. Nevertheless, he sent him to jail, and he excused him. He said, sorry, basically, I have to send you to jail.
Yeah.
Well, in the Torah, it never happened. And the Quran is actually the Torah of the garment, where it was a torn on the back or the front, determined prove also his innocence, as in Midrash.
Right.
So, and again, as you said, Midrash is more in a biblical narrative. It's like following kind of, loosely and add stuff which is not there. But it's almost like you have cup full of water and you run and you spill water out of the cup, but not much, just some parts of it. And whatever spilled fell into the Quran.
Yeah,
So,
and it's interesting because and we're gonna, I think it's in the next one or two that we get to the cutting of the hands one, but I was gonna say even before we get there, and it will add to it when we read it, is anybody who reads the Quran, it's like, if you don't know the Midrash, you're reading the Quran for the first time. When you're reading this account of the seduction scene, then in the Quran's account, he's found innocent, not guilty, and she's found guilty. But then there's this extra scene of the cutting of the hands in the banquet, which we're going to get to. But then after that, he goes to prison. So what you were mentioning in the Midrash, he kind of goes to prison abruptly and kind of illogically, like it doesn't
in the
make
Quran.
sense. You still in the Midrash, what you just said, because he's Potiphar realizes Joseph's innocent, but he sends him anyway.
Oh,
so it's kind of and kind of like to cover up something. So
his wife.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in it, but it's all connected. But the point is, it's kind of a uncomfortable feeling like this doesn't make sense why he ended up going there.
Yeah.
And you've had that same feeling as you get in the Midrash as you do in the Quran, that it's like abrupt that he ends up going to prison. Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah.
And which tells you also, while the Midrash is based on the skeleton of the Torah, it's the Quran that's really based on an oral telling of the Midrash, but it's messed up a little bit, or significantly.
Okay, let's go for another one. Joseph was declared innocent by proof of torn clothes, so we just talked about it, and I think we just mentioned it but it's a significant difference here.
Might as well read it, and there's obviously no parallel in the Torah.
So when her husband, I'm going to read verse 28, husband saw that Joseph's shirt was torn from the back, he said to her, this must be an example of the cunning of you, woman. Indeed, your cunning is so shrewd. In Midrash is actually, it turned out that to be front part of the mantle. And they came to the conclusion, meaning, judges, came to conclusion that Zureka had tried to hold him fast, and he has been foiled in her attempt by Joseph, against whom she was holding a trumped-up charge. So they decided that Joseph was not incurred the death penalty, but they condemned him to incarceration because he was the cause of a stain upon Zuleika's fair name. Well, I don't know what fair name means in that case. But nevertheless, we could see another
her public perception, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Well, but it's funny because now we have the Quran is basically retelling stories of the torn shirt in a kind of simplified way.
Mm-hmm.
But the big difference between the Midrash and the Quran is, like, Midrash said it was torn from the front, the Quran said torn from the back. So they have completely different reasons why. Both of them actually, in both cases, they pronounce him innocent, but it's kind of funny way how the Quran, I think it's more logical in that case than Midrash, in my opinion. Like, turn it back, it makes sense.
Oh, which side it is? Yeah, that makes sense.
So, but it doesn't make sense. And the funny, in one of Midrash, it said, like, it was actually read from the back, but angel, I think Michael, transferred that Torah to the front of the.
Really? I didn't read that one. Okay, that's crazy.
And it's like, oh my goodness, it's like, why you do that? I mean, anyway.
I think what I read, I don't think it's in this one, is that it's because she's holding him.
Yeah.
And then her knife is underneath the shirt.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So when he pulls away, the front of the shirt rips from the knife.
But the problem is the shirt, usually it's not the shirt like we have a shirt, right? So like this,
right.
We have a front and a back, right? It's basically the cover is like a piece, which is a loose piece. So that's why he left the shirt.
Right. It just fell off. Yeah.
So in the Quran, because she was running with him and she tore the shirt from his back, the shirt was on him. In the Torah, shirt and him departed. In the Midrash, the shirt and he parted, but shirt get ripped off in the process. So it's kind of the Midrash is more complicated.
Yeah.
But the Quran is like really small, but nothing to do with the Torah.
Yeah,
that's important. So as you said, Muslim could say, well, you see, the Christians accuse Muhammad of
plagiarism,
but it's not. He's not. No, he's not plagiarizing Torah. Forget about
plagiarism. You need to know the source you're getting it from. But
exactly,
clearly, Muhammad or the author of the Quran didn't know the biblical text.
And he didn't even know the Midrashic text. That's why he made him like
right.
It's not even plagiarism from Midrash. It's somewhat. The plagiarism, in my opinion, is a perfect copy paste without reference.
Right.
But here is not a perfect copy paste. It's mixed up, and we're going to see it now here in the next example. The wife of Potiphar prepared a banquet for the women of the city. In the Quran is amazingly. So after ripped shirt and after Potiphar, Aziz declared Joseph innocent, and Joseph kept working in the house. Some time passed. So some people of the city gossiped the chief minister's wife is trying to seduce her slave boy. Love for him has plagued her heart. Indeed, we see that she's clearly mistaken. So let's say 1 week after the incident, the rumor starts spreading. And she started hearing them talking about it. It said when she heard about their gossip, meaning, let's say 1 week later, right? And 1 week, Joseph is still working in the house, no problem, right? Now, after she heard about their gossip, she invited them to set a banquet for them. She gave each one a knife and then said to Joseph, come out before them. Then they saw him. They were so stunned by his beauty that they cut their hands and exclaimed, good God, this cannot be human. That must be a noble angel. And she said, you see, like you blame him, like you blame me for that guy. I mean, look at yourself, right? So that was the idea for her to bring them in because of the gossip. She didn't like how they gossip about her. So she put them into her own position, and they basically agree, then they've been wrong. I mean, they will do the same thing what she did. She tried to do, right? So that's
that's the key point, is the reason for the banquet. Yeah.
But we have nothing like that in the Torah. Zero. But we have in the Midrash.
And it has no room. It can't fit in. There's no room
And
to fit it in the storyline.
it's kind of the same, but it's not. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so here's what we have. She, Zuleika, commanded her maidservants. Okay, I have to tell before what happened. She was sick because of love, and he's not responding. So her friends, girlfriends, saw her in very pale state. They asked her, like, what's happened to you? Why you look so sick? And she said, come to my to the dinner, to the banquet. And she said, so she commanded her maidservants to prepare food for all women, and she spread the banquet before them in her house. She placed knives upon the table to peel the oranges. Okay, that's another very important distinction between the Quran. Quran doesn't say oranges, it says fruits. But
Well,
Jesus
it
says,
doesn't say anything in the Quran.
yeah, kind of like, yeah, but its idea is you peel something. So
Yeah,
here's a
yeah.
very important oranges. I think it's oranges is from Morocco or something. Anyway.
There's different midrash that gives different fruit.
Anyway, okay, why
Yeah.
not? And then ordered Joseph to appear, arrayed in costly garments, and wait upon her guests. When Joseph came in, the women could not take their eyes off him, and they cut their hands with knives, and oranges in their hands were covered with blood. But they, not knowing what they were doing, continued to look upon the beauty of Joseph without turning their eyes away from him. And then she said, you see, that's a guy who caused me to be sick. And they said, OMG, look at that. I mean, we feel so sorry for you. Like, we have this lust towards him within, like, looking at, let's say, 10 seconds at him. But poor you see him day in, day out, every single day. And they say, hey, you're her master, well, mistress, or whatever. Like, you can order him. He's your slave boy. Come on, let's have sex. Why are you waiting? Look at him. I mean, why you have to be so sick? And she said, no, you don't know how, he resisted and whatever, right? So that story in the Midrash, it's bizarre as it is. It's not in the Torah, cannot be in the Torah. But idea for her invite them to the banquet is not because they gossip about her. They have no idea. She actually revealed her secret to them.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew about she has an affair, or well, she tried to have an affair with slave boy. That's in the Quran. They knew. They find out she tried to get an affair with a slave boy unsuccessfully. So they gossip about her. They condemn her. In that case, they had no clue, and she called them to show them that's my problem, him. And they say, "Oh, we're so sorry for you. Why don't you order him?" So it's totally different idea. And funny part is because it's in the Midrash. It happened almost a year before the torn short incident. Because at the end of the Quranic narrative, she said, "I will still make him lay with me, or I will send him to prison for why your own husband declared him innocent. Like, what can you do?" But eventually he prayed to Allah saying, I'd rather go to prison, and he went to prison for unknown reason. But in the Midrash, the incident with the cutting hands happened about a year before the rip shirt. So that made the Midrash, it's no matter how bizarre it is, it's still going alongside with the Torah story. Because in the Torah, the night of the shirt was left by him, he went to the prison by the end of the day.
Yeah, it is even more complicated because there are different midrashic accounts of it that put it at different times.
Okay.
But either way, whether it's happening before or after the seduction scene that's told in Genesis 37, because there's midrash that says basically she invites her female servants after she tries and he runs away, and then she holds the banquet and basically tells them to get in on it and say that he tried to seduce them as well. So tell your husbands that he tried to seduce you as well.
Yeah, but
And
there's no
basically
cutting
he's just
at that moment.
there is, and I don't remember. I have to look at the account again. But
Yeah,
the point is,
yeah,
it's in some of them, I think. So uh, the issue that I saw is the unifying problem, no matter the account, is the reason. The reason for calling the women was never what the Quran says, which is that it's gossip,
yeah,
right? That because the Quran is saying that the women are looking down on her and
yeah.
like think that she's done something bad, and they're condemning her, and so she has to do the banquet scene to save her name. Whereas if she's lovesick, in
Yeah.
this version that Ginsburg tells, they're having pity for her. They're not
Oh,
blaming her and condemning her and gossiping. Or in the other case, she's conspiring with them, not them looking down on her and
yeah.
blaming her and gossiping. They can't gossip about it if it hasn't got around yet. She's trying to get ahead of it getting around, so she includes the other people before she tells her husband. So
Mhm.
that's, and of course there's no real time for that in the Torah. It's like a
Oh, yeah.
contrived event,
And the
either
husbands
way, by the
rush to his
rabbis.
house and protest for they say to Potiphar that Joseph tries to seduce all his wives.
Yeah, how you gonna hold a banquet before Potiphar gets home?
Oh
Like,
no, there's no
it's
bank.
impossible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
no, I know. I just it's impossible. Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Now Jacob told his sons to enter the city through different gates. This is one of the gem, I believe,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's nowhere in the and I couldn't wrap my mind around it when reading the Quran about it. Like, what he's talking about? Why is he talking about it? Let's read it. Then he instructed them, "O my sons, do not enter the city all through one gate," which is
let's
that's the
give the
second time.
context for them.
Yeah,
So that,
it
yeah,
was. They came from the first meeting with Joseph without knowing this was Joseph. They find the
the
silver in their
brothers. Yeah,
bags, and yeah, then they said, "Oh, we want to go. We should go back and get more food, but Benjamin, or unnamed son, should come with us." And father said, "No, you have to swear by Allah." They swear by Allah. Father said, "Okay, you might go with him." And then he said, "Oh, by the way, my sons don't enter the city all through one gate, but through separate gates. I cannot help you against what is destined by Allah. In least, it's only Allah who decides. In Him I put my trust, and in Him let the faithful put their trust." Then, when they entered as their father has instructed them, this did not help them against the will of Allah whatsoever. It was just the desire of Jacob's heart which he satisfied. Okay. So I usually ask Muslims and Christians as well, what do you think why he instructed them not to go through the same gate? Well, different ideas, mostly like safety, security, so nobody will attack them, kill them, rob them, whatever, right? And the Quran doesn't say anything. So we have to go to the tafsir, or let's go to the source, the Midrash, right? As he, Jacob, knew that his sons were likely to attract attention on account of their heroic style and handsome appearance, he cautioned them against going to the city altogether through the same gate, or indeed showing themselves altogether anywhere in public, that the evil eye be not cast upon them. That's the reason. Midrash is very explicitly said it was that he doesn't want them to be evil-eyed by people who will notice their beauty, like Norsemen or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, so that story somehow crept in the Quran without giving a reason why. So you have to actually write tafsir and take it from a Jewish Midrash and
yeah,
explain.
and I've got a example that I can read.
Okay.
So from Tafsir al-Jalalain.
Mm-hmm.
So he comments on verse 68. It was but a need in Jacob's soul, which he thus satisfied, and this need was his desire to fend off the evil eye, from them out of affection for them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the tafsir, the Muslim commentators,
Mm-hmm.
learn even more Jewish legends through presumably orally from other Jews telling them.
Oh, yeah.
And probably it was just part of what Muhammad would have heard when it got incorporated into the Quran, but it didn't get the full story didn't get told, right?
Maybe because the Quran is poetic book, so there is no rhythm in evil eye in Arabic.
Or it's because of the occasion, he just didn't remember it, because there's other signs that he didn't remember things correctly.
Yeah.
When he retold the story.
But here's a problem. Again, the Muslims will have only the last resort to protect their faith, saying, well, Midrash took from the Quran, or the Jews learned from the Quran this story. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work. The reason is very simple. In the Quran, he warned them, father warned sons not to go through the same gate before they went second time with Benjamin.
Yeah, the second trip down to Egypt.
Second trip, yeah. Exactly. But that doesn't make sense because you didn't warn them the first trip somehow. You neglected, and they've been already evil-eyed. That's my words. So they've been evil-eyed, and they suffered a lot. So it's kind of late before the second trip to tell them. But Midrash is perfectly logical. In Midrash, it's before the first trip he instructed them, which makes sense. So we see how Quran is trailing behind Midrash, and not even telling story exactly as in the Midrash, but make it in the reverse in the time frame, as we see with the ripped short and cutting heads incident. They are in opposite time frame. Same thing here. So it's not before the first trip, father instructed his sons in the Quran, but before the second trip. In the Midrash, it's before the first trip, not before the second trip, which makes sense.
So obviously the author of the Quran mixed it up and forgot to tell it on the first trip, so he added it on the second. I just remembered I was rearranging things in my home, and they have this is a mezuzah.
Okay.
It goes on the door and has a little Torah scroll in it.
Yep. Okay.
And I got it in Jerusalem. And at the very bottom is the hand for the protection of the evil from the evil
that's
eye.
right. Yeah, I could see. Right? Yeah. Huh.
So
well, because the Jews, as a Muslims, they're very superstitious.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, they use this verse from the Midrash, if I could use it, verse, to say, well, you see, evil eye existed because Jacob himself warned his people, his sons. Well, that's called superstition. That's not in the Bible at all. Mm-hmm. So again, we have another thing against...
2 more to go.
Yeah. Let's go. Joseph revealed himself to Benjamin before other brothers, which is like bizarre, right? Because the Quran said, when they brothers entered Joseph's presence, he called his brother Benjamin aside and confided him to him. I am indeed your brother Joseph. Don't feel distressed about what they have been doing.
So it should be said while we have no parallel in the Torah, it's because Joseph never tells anybody, or specifically Benjamin, apart from the rest of his brothers. He tells them all at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's no confiding in one person or telling Joseph or telling Benjamin privately. So that's why there's no parallel, because it contradicts it completely. In the Quran, compared to the Torah, was interesting what the Midrash says about that. I remember reading it. It's laughing because it's so many funny things that the rabbis made up.
Yeah, especially the astrolabe. It said Benjamin then look upon the astrolabe. So somehow Joseph has the astrolabe, which is devised to navigate through the stars and whatever, right? Usually when you sail on a sea, on the ocean, whatever, right? So somehow Joseph had it in his like presence, this astrolabe, who brought it. Benjamin looked upon the astrolabe, and to his great amusement, he discovered by astonishment.
Yeah.
He discovered by the aid of it that he was sitting upon the throne. Before him was his brother Joseph. Can you imagine?
It's like a divining instrument.
Like a compass telling you, like, oh, that's Joseph. Like, how do you know?
I wonder how the instrument told him.
Yeah, that's what I tried. So, like, can you see the like arrows and
thinking like those magic 8 balls that you shake and it like shows
that's right.
message.
Yeah.
Joseph's
Then
in front of me.
the name appeared.
Yeah.
Anyways,
if it was something like that, maybe.
Yeah. So the Joseph asked him, "What happened to you?" And he said, "Oh, I could see by this that Joseph, my brother, is before me upon the throne." And Joseph said, "I am Joseph, your brother," and blah 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 blah. Right. So we could see
and reveal. Don't tell your brothers is next line. It's important too.
Yeah.
So he's telling it privately without the brothers there, and then he keeps it from them. Which in the Quran he also does. He keeps it from them.
Yeah, but Muhammad forgot about astrolabe.
Yeah.
That's. But it's just show us how it's Midrash is spilling over some stuff in the Quran, and it's get a little bit different as we see here. It's not as much as different as previous examples, but nevertheless, we could see how clearly Quran parallel to the Midrashic account of the knowledge Benjamin has about Joseph was alive before his brothers, in both cases, in the Quran and in the Midrash, but definitely Torah is completely opposite. And the last one, the brothers called Benjamin a thief. Yeah. So in the Quran it said, to distance themselves, Joseph's brothers argued, if he has stolen, so did his full brother before. But Joseph suppressed his outrage, revealing nothing to them, and said to himself, you are in such an evil position, and Allah knows best the truth, what you claim. Nothing about in the Quran, in the Torah, because they just simply turn the cloth and start crying and walk back to the palace of Joseph after in the Benjamin's sack, the cup was discovered. So, but Midrash is basically almost a little telling story the same way as we find it later in the Quran. In a rage, his brethren shouted at Benjamin, O you thief and the son of a thief, your mother brought shame upon our father by your thievery, and now you bring shame upon us. Well, again, as we see, Muslims cannot claim that Midrash is following the Quranic account, because Quran has no idea about Rachel stealing her father Laban's idols and hiding in the tent. That's what they refer to in this Midrash, which never been referred in the Bible, in the Torah, right? But they say, "Oh, Benjamin, you thief, and you son of a thief, because your mother brought the shame upon our father."
It specifies mother being
specified mother, which we know from the Torah. And Quran is unaware. The author of the Quran has no idea about that. What happened?
And right? It's interesting because the brothers, so the Midrash, because it's following the biblical account, brothers can level that accusation against Benjamin and specifically his mother, because they don't have the same mother.
Exactly.
Right? And in the Quranic account, although every Muslim believes that Jacob had four women and 12 sons, it's not told anywhere in the Quranic account. None of the sons' names are given other than Joseph.
Yeah.
Okay? Everybody else is unnamed. If you're reading a translation of it, it's going to add in Benjamin and things like that in it, because the story doesn't make sense in the Quran without having some names.
Oh, yeah.
How do you distinguish his brother from all of his other brothers?
It's only the brother mentioned.
Yeah. So even here it says in the brackets full brother, because it doesn't have full in the Arabic. And
it sounds bizarre, definitely.
It sounds bizarre, but obviously it's based in the oral retelling of the stuff, but it's not clear. And obviously the Quranic account is built more on the Midrashic elements in that oral retelling of it, whereas the Midrash is definitely not based on the Quran. It's based on the biblical framework.
Yeah, that's true. So go back again. Conclusion is the Quran reveals the truth of its origins in Jewish legends, not in a Jewish book, not in a Jewish Torah, in the Midrash, which is so-called oral Torah, which is not oral, not Torah, but written legends of the Jews. And let's read this 25, 4 and 5, which is very clear passage in the Quran, accidentally revealing its true origin or true inspiration, the source of inspiration. The disbelievers say this Quran is nothing but a fabrication which he made up with the help of others. So somebody helped Muhammad, right? And they say those revelations are only ancient fables which he has written down, and they are rehearsed to him morning and evening. So they said people coming to him and rehearse him morning and evening, and it's all ancient fables. It's Jewish legends. And again, I have to stress out because they never say it's Jewish book or Jewish kitab, right? It's not a scripture. It's legends.
And it's not ancient history.
No. It's
stories. Fairy tales.
It's a fairy tale. Legends. Stories. That's what we hear. That's what we saw. In a Surah of Yusuf, 10 examples taken clearly from Midrash. And it's built upon that. So it's the Quran not only contradicts the Torah, it's referred to the Midrash, and in some way it's also contradict Midrash. So it's very, very strange situation, but then at the end of the day, that's reality the Muslims should face. They have to understand that it was the author of the Quran was nobody else but illiterate Bedouin Muhammad ibn Abdullah, who has no idea what the written Torah contained. So when the Jews told him the stories from the so-called oral Torah, Midrash, he put them in the Quran without thinking that was not the Torah. He was sure it was the Torah because the Jews confidently told him the stories as if it was true. As you said, even today the Jewish rabbi believe in this, many of the stories from Midrash. So
yeah, surprisingly, like you and I, we tried starting to talk to some of them, or we're kind of exploring. Do you believe some of these things? Like, what's your and to our surprise, generally they're affirmed. So,
yeah, like, rabbis
like really
affirm it. Yeah, that's very, very strange.
We were expecting it to be, like trying to distance themselves from it and saying it's not reliable and not authoritative. But yeah, it's interesting. And so what that really proves to our overall idea that we're saying, a theory, is that Islam is really what it is. It's a heretical religious movement coming out of rabbinical Judaism. Yeah. Not coming out of a heretical form of Christianity. It's coming primarily from rabbinical Judaism. I mean, how can the Christians tell Muhammad's all of these rabbinical legends? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's true. So it's we could say Islam is heretical religion, a religious movement from heretical rabbinical Judaism.
Of course, yeah, because rabbinical Judaism is also heretical.
So that's heretical, rabbinical, Pharisaical Judaism. It's long. But we have to say, well, we can't just say Judaism, so we have to define it clearly.
And it's designed for the Gentiles, so
yep.
It's like it's not. That's why I would say, if anything, I would put more emphasis on the rabbinical than the Jewishness, because it's not really Jewish. It's for Gentiles, but it's rabbinical in its teachings and its theology, as we've talked about in other things. I think we got one more slide just to give the quotes again. You just read the one from Surah Al-Furqan, but again, as you like, the first one is worth mentioning again, from Surah 26, 192 and 196, that the Quran is certainly a revelation from the Lord of our worlds. Well, I don't agree with that, but but it is, and indeed it is mentioned in the scriptures of the former people. So that's the claim of the Quran, that the Quran is mentioned in the scriptures of the former peoples. But as we see, using the translation from Sahih International, verse 5 from 25. It's that what the disbelievers who recognize what the Quran really is from our point of view, not of course what the Quran is saying, but the disbelievers in the time who rejected it said, this is really just legends of former peoples, not scriptures of former
Yeah,
peoples.
exactly. That's clear distinction given in the text. So as we see, the Midrash is basically the final,
Final nail in
finalizing
the coffin.
huh?
Final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, we can say that. Yeah, final nail in the coffin of Islam, because there is no way to the Muslim, after knowing that fact, to completely like saying no, it's Quran is still from a God. Like,
Yeah, well, and also it answers that question that was on one of our first, I think the first slide, which is where did it come from?
exactly.
Right? Where did the Quran come from? Which I've had a lot of people ask me that
Oh,
question.
yeah.
Even Muslims when I'm going through it. So like, what are you saying? And where
Mhm.
did it come from then? Like according to your view, and because we are generally showing them just differences in the stories.
Yeah.
Right. So then it leads to naturally, where did this come from? Well, if you dig deeper and look closer and look at actually are aware of the Jewish Midrash,
Mhm.
it's very clear where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's for sure. So now we have a source, and now that that's revelation for the Muslims to hear that the Quran is actually came from a Midrash through rabbis and through Muhammad, without any angel Gabriel involvement in the process. So
Well, the other part of the trilogy, the second part of the trilogy, the global Torah conspiracy theory, which is essentially the Muslims are claiming that, well, not that they really know the extent of what the implications of what they're claiming, but the real implication of what they're claiming is that there was a giant Jewish conspiracy to tamper with the Torah so that it's the way it is. Well, we're actually saying there is actually a Jewish conspiracy, but it was the rabbis who messed with Muhammad, and
Yep.
Muhammad didn't know how to check it himself because he couldn't read, like he wasn't in a position to check it.
Yep.
So he didn't know actually that they were probably intentionally telling him a lot of these stories even incorrectly, which explains that it's not just his memory problem. It's actually probably more than a memory problem. Maybe he had a really good memory, but actually it's him not being acquainted for himself with the text and hearing it and also being told the stories in a distorted way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Muhammad was more like being victim here
Yeah.
for the conspiracy plot against him. But nevertheless, Islam as a false religion have nothing to do with Abraham, Ishmael, and have nothing to do with anything. Right?
And actually, it explains the role of Jesus too, that he's not regarded as the Son of God and stuff, because that's the rabbinical view as well. They don't accept him as the Son of God or like a divine Messiah. Obviously, they don't accept him as Messiah. And the Quran uses the title, but it empties it of its significance, that it doesn't really affect the Jews anymore. He's just reduced to another prophet. Yeah, so I think it's worth seeing that from that perspective. So it's not just because I think people wonder, where does Jesus fit in? Yeah, and I think that easily explains it, because not all Jewish rabbis or religious Jews have a very negative view of Jesus. Sometimes they just say he was probably a good rabbi, but what the Christians say about him, they exaggerated. They turn him. Maybe they mix their beliefs with pagan, Greco-Roman paganism, and elevated him to divine status when he never said that about himself.
So we can see that, that's what they can see, and unfortunately for many Christians, because they find traces of Jesus or Isa al-Masih in the Quran, they think, oh, it was supposedly like Jewish offshoot sect who became like later on Muslims by Abdul Malik or who knows whom. But reality is, as we see today, just in one surah of Yusuf, the heavy Jewish influence on Muhammad.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. And actually, I'm sure there's a lot more elements even in Surah 12, but it would just take too much time to go through and identify all the little things, because, like we're saying, you can see the Quran is kind of built on this more like a midrashic skeleton.
Yep.
So if you look closely enough, you'll see more things.
And later we're gonna record other videos to put more stuff from like connection between Midrash and the Quran.
For all the other stories.
All the stories, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.